if you go back and look at some of the 4-team college football playoff years, it was abundantly clear from the kickoff of the opening game to the national championship game of who was going to be in the national championship game, that there were some years only 2 teams that could legitimately hold up the trophy at the end of the year. And sometimes there was only one team that would be the logical choice to pick to win the national championship. And I don't think that exists much anymore now, for better or worse. I don't think we have that all that frequently in college football. Now, while this year I think that the field of teams who could legitimately win the national championship is a little bit smaller than last year, where going into the playoff, I thought that there was probably 5, 6, 7, or 8 teams who could have legitimately won the national championship in the new 12-team era. I don't think it's that deep this year, but I still think that it's not completely decided about who is going to have their picture taken with confetti falling, holding that trophy up on the final night of the season. And it seems as if it's pretty clear that Lane Kiffin agrees. In an interview with ESPN on Wednesday, he said this. He said, "In my opinion, the dynasties are over. Alabama with Coach Saban and then Kirby at Georgia, where they had those rosters year in, year out, and there would be a bunch of wins by 30 points in the conference. Those days are done." And I agree with Lane Kiffin. For a variety of reasons, I think the days of dynasties and maybe not the days of dynasty, but the definition of dynasty is going to have to change for anybody to have the idea that they have a dynasty or had a dynasty, because it's going to be so stinking difficult in 2 areas. The 2 areas that matter most in college football today, the transfer portal and NIL. Because, and Lane Kiffin went on to explain himself that, hey, there was a time when I was at Alabama that you could say, go look at the outside linebackers, and we would have 6 guys that were going to play in the NFL someday at outside linebacker. That doesn't exist anymore because players want to play. That's all they want to do. They want to get on the field. They want to show what they can do. They need to have a pathway to the NFL. And in their minds, the pathway to the NFL does not include sitting for 2 or 3 years at their initial school, biding their time, and then getting on the field as a senior. Now, the reason they feel that way is because they're right. That's not the pathway to the NFL. There are few players that when you sit down in April to watch the draft, and it's round 3, 4, 5, or whatever the case may be, and they bring Mel Kiper on, and he says, well, didn't play a whole lot until he was a senior. It doesn't happen that frequently, because this might come as a shock to some folks, but the best way to get attention for playing football is to play football. And generally, NFL scouts, directors of player personnel, GMs, coaches, don't care about your practice film. They don't especially care. They care about the underwear Olympics, the combine, and they care about what you did on Saturdays. What did you put on tape on Saturdays? That's what matters most. And so those players, that's what they care about prioritizing. Thus, if you're not going to play as a freshman or sophomore, I'm going to go somewhere that I will and can. That's just a logical step of wanting to make the NFL. The other side of that is NIL. There's almost always, universally, and this is true of real life, by the way, somebody out there who's going to have a better offer for you, NIL-wise. You know what the fastest way to increase your income is right this second? It's to leave your job and go somewhere else. The fastest way to double your income, triple your income, increase it by 1%. The fastest and easiest way is go somewhere else, and they'll do that for you. Because if you walk into your boss's office and say, I'd like a raise, and even if you say, I'd like a 1% raise, probability will tell you that either The answer is fine, we'll do that, or no. If you walk into your boss's office and say, I want a 20% raise, the answer is almost universally going to be no. But if you are a key contributor at Alabama or Georgia, as Lane Kiffin mentioned, of like the dynasties in the SEC, there are other schools out there. We'll give you 20% more. And even if you don't come here, it's going to cost that school 20% more to keep you. And that's a win for me still anyway. I think Lane Kiffin is exactly correct in that NIL and the transfer portal have made dynasties really, really, really hard to sustain. As evidenced by, if you look around the college football landscape, there are 3 dudes who have a national championship trophy at the FBS level in their pocket. Ryan Day, Dabo Swinney, Kirby Smart. Because the overwhelming majority of them had been gobbled up by Nick Saban. And he ain't there anymore. And so while I think you're still going to have the same teams over and over and over again, I think you're going to have the Ohio States, Georgias, LSUs, Texases of the world. I would throw Penn State in there probably, to tell you the truth, that are going to be routinely college football playoff participants and contenders. I think the years and the days of, well, Ohio State wins the Big Ten, Alabama or Georgia wins the SEC, Clemson wins the ACC, and whoever is going to step up to fill the Texas or Oklahoma spot in the Big 12 are going to win those leagues every year. I think those days are done. As I think you can see it in the Big Ten, for instance, in the past couple of years. You've seen Michigan, Oregon, Ohio State all share spots as the top dog in that conference and winning that conference championship. In the SEC, you've still seen LSU, Georgia, Alabama at the top dog of that spot. Ole Miss is challenging that when Ole Miss doesn't really have any business challenging that. South Carolina made a bid last year to be a conference title contender going into the final weeks of the season. Tennessee made the college football playoff. Texas is going to be a player in that. The days of only these couple of teams running the sport are gone. And for everybody other than Ohio State, Notre Dame, Texas, Alabama, LSU, Georgia, Clemson, I think that's a good thing. The chances of more fan bases, more teams being in the running for conference championship games, therefore being in the running for college football playoff slots, is a good thing for the sport overall. The days when it was literally 4 of about 6 or 7 teams, and we just mentioned them there: Ohio State, Oklahoma, Alabama, LSU, Georgia, Clemson, Notre Dame, those being the 4 teams who had a shot to win the title over and over and over again, I don't think we're great for college football. I think we're better off being in a situation where with 12 teams making the field and there being 16, 18, 20, 24 teams who are still in the running as we get to the nitty-gritty in November, I think that's a good thing for the sport overall. I know that there are ways to fine-tune it. I know there are ways to feel better about it, whatever the case may be. But I think Lane Kiffin is right in that the days of dynasties as we know them, as Alabama or Clemson winning multiple titles in a short amount of time, I think are done and over with. And I think that's a good thing. I want to know what you think about that. Do you think it's a good thing? How do you define a dynasty? I'd love to hear your thoughts on that in the comments below. That'll do it for today's episode of the Daily Huddle. Appreciate you making us a part of your day, however it is, wherever it is you're doing so. If you're watching on YouTube, hit the subscribe button. Make sure you're getting all the great college football content we're pumping out. If you are listening on the podcast feed, drop a 5-star review. It goes a long way in helping out the channel. I'll see you tomorrow for another episode of the Daily Huddle.